Today I want to share with you 7 Homage watches. Watches that I currently own or have owned. All 7 watches, in my opinion, are better than the Grail watches or the luxury watches that they are homaging. But more interesting than that is not just that I think they're better, is that every watch on this list, each of the 7, has a different reason why I think it is better than the watch it is homaging. Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I'm talking about watches. And today I'm talking about homage versus grails again. Now, I'm not going to be talking about every homage watch. I'm not going to be specifically talking about specific grail watches or that you should buy one over another. It is more the fact that I've had 7 watches in my collection, most of which I still have in my collection, that I like more and I think are better than the watches that they are homaging. Each one for a different reason. And it wasn't until I realised that each watch, when I was thinking about them, was better for me than the watches that they were homaging, that I thought, hey, this is going to make an interesting video. Because it is an interesting thought process for me. I quite like thinking about Grail watches versus homage watches. I'm perfectly fine owning homage watches, obviously, but I certainly understand the arguments against it. You know, why would you buy a watch that looks exactly like one, spend all that money, when you can just use that money and save towards the actual watch? It makes sense. But I also understand the opposite end of that argument, that, well, I may never be able to buy that watch, but I still want to experience that watch. So I get it. But then I also understand the other side saying, well, why would you buy a homage watch at that price, when at that price you can get a unique watch, an amazing watch, maybe a better watch than that homage watch, and it's unique. So I get that too. But I also get the other side of the story where they're saying, well, yes, I get that, and I own some of those watches, but I want to feel and experience that style of watch, and I'm never going to be able to afford it. Or they might even try it on and own that homage watch for a while to get to feel whether they actually want to own that Grail watch. Because I've owned watches before, and then after a while sort of fall out of love with them. And for a budget watch, well, that's sort of okay, I can sell it. But if I'm spending a huge amount of money on a Grail watch, that would be quite a disappointing feeling to me. So I kind of get that side of things. Well, I'm just trialing it. I've also seen people that have the homage watch of their own watch. It's because they love that style of watch so much that they have the luxury watch for when they're comfortable wearing it, and they have the homage to their own luxury watch when they are a bit worried about it or it might get scratched or bumped. So they get to wear that same style of watch all the time. So I get that too. I get that there's lots of arguments for both sides of the story, and I'm interested in those arguments because I think it's quite an interesting thing to think about. But today I want to talk about 7 watches that I've personally owned or have owned. And I hope that when I talk this through that it becomes a bit apparent about what I'm trying to say and why I think these watches that are in my collection are so special. And in fact, stop me even thinking about or wanting the watches that they are homaging. This is not a step up the ladder towards that Grail watch. These are instead of those watches. And I want to share those experiences with you today. So the first one is my Steinhardt Vintage Military. Now this one is available in a 39 and a 42. This one here is a 42mm. I was a little bit concerned about that size at the time, and I was concerned about that size at the time because it didn't really reflect the watch that it was homaging. But what it ended up being is better than the watch it was homaging because I preferred the size. And being a homage of a vintage watch, well, in reality, if I had the opportunity to own that vintage watch, well, the quality wouldn't probably be as good as this modern watch. The movement wouldn't be probably as reliable as this watch. This Steinhardt for me is better proportioned and probably better quality and better feeling on wrist than the original. Next is one of my favourite watches in my collection, and it continues to be one of my favourite watches in my collection, and it's my Hruodland Pilot Turbine. Now I do talk about this watch a lot because there is something special about it. But the reason why I think this one is better than the watch that it is actually homaging is because you can actually buy it. The watch that this one is homaging is a limited release of 7 watches around about 5 to 10 years ago. And even if you had the money to buy it, which I'm sure it would be a huge amount of money to buy the watch that this one is homaging, you can't actually get it. Even like compared to the first watch I was talking about, the Steinhardt, where it's very difficult to find those vintage watches, this watch that this one is homaging, it's impossible to buy it. So for me, not only is this an amazing watch, but it's better than the original because you can actually buy this one. Next is the Steel Dive 1970, and this is well known to be an amazing bargain automatic watch. In fact, probably one of the best watches you can buy at an affordable range. And this one's better than the original because it is actually a bargain. The original watch of this is a great watch. It's lovely, but it's just, for me, not worth the money. It's a good watch, and if you own it, well, I'm sure you'll enjoy it, but I wouldn't enjoy it at that price. That's why I think this steel dive is actually better. Not because it's affordable. It's good that it's affordable, but I like it because it's actually achievable and it's a bargain, and I want to own this watch at this price. And I wouldn't want to own the original at the price that they are selling for. Firstly, the originals, as well as the recreations of it from the actual brand itself. Next is my bronze Sugess Pilot Chrono. Has turned out to be one of my favorite watches in my collection, a watch that I'm wearing a lot. And the reason why I like this one more than the original, the reason why I would pick this one over the original, is because I'm never, ever going to buy the original. It's not a Grail watch for me. It's not even on my top 10 Grail watches. It's not even my top 30 Grail watches. It's a watch that I like, but it's not a watch that I'm ever interested in buying. Partly because of price, but because there's just so many other watches that I'd rather buy than this one. Yet this Homage watch is at a price that allows me to buy it without too much thought. And as a result, I've ended up buying it and I love it. It is a fantastic watch. And I have absolutely no desire to buy or own the original. The next one's actually kind of interesting. It's also a bronze watch, another one by Hruodland. This one's interesting because this is actually the watch that is homaging another watch that I really like. It's even homaging a watch that might actually be within a price range that I could almost buy, or if I put some things in place that I'd probably be able to buy. And it was a watch that I was even considering buying, but now that I own this Hruodland, I have no interest in buying the original because I like this one better than the original. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the movement's better or the quality's better, none of that. I'm saying I like this one better than the original. I like the design of this one, the dial of this one, everything about it I really like. And you can't buy this watch from the original. This is obviously a homage watch, but it's almost just a heavily inspired watch because you can't get this dial in the original. You can't get that strap in the original. And I like that strap and I like that dial. And as a result, I actually like this watch more than the original. The next one's a funny one, the Gustav Becker. This one's only about half the price of the original watch, which makes you think, well, why would you buy the homage when for double the price, you can get the original, especially when both of them are relatively affordable. And the reason why this one's better than the original is because it's actually better. It has a better movement in it. It's made probably equally as well. It's beautifully finished. It's a watch which I've said on a number of times is one of the best watches you can buy on Aliexpress. And I still stand by that. In fact, this, for the money, is the best watch you can buy on Aliexpress. It is incredible. And it is better than the original because of the movement that is inside of it. This one contains a Seiko movement, a mechanical movement which I trust and I feel very happy with, whereas the original has a seagull movement. And I like seagull movement. I've got nothing against seagull movements, but I'll pick a Seiko movement every single time. And when a watch is this good with a Seiko movement and half the price of the original, I'm never going to buy the original because this one is better. Lastly is my Chronos L6005. This is an obvious homage, and there's a lot of homages to this particular watch. And I'm using my Chronos as an example because this is the one that I've owned. But I think this might sort of extend to quite a few other variations of these homages, the good quality variations of the homage. And the reason why I think this is better than the original is because it's actually attainable. The original to this watch is very, very popular, and I get why it is very, very popular. People love it. But is it really worth the money that they're asking for it? Is it worth paying over retail for it? Are you actually able to get your hands on one? The answer is generally no. In my opinion, it is no. Hence why I think this good quality homage of this watch is better, because it's actually attainable and it's actually enjoyable to wear as a result of that. What do you think about these 7 watches, guys? Do you think I'm completely bonkers? Do you think perhaps that I've gone completely off the rails here, trying to say and trying to convince people that these homages are better than the watches that they are homaging? Better than the Grails? Better than these luxury watches? Well, I don't know. As I said at the start, I'm not saying that they are physically better. I'm not saying that you shouldn't strive towards owning those luxury watches. I'm not saying if you own them that you've made a bad decision. Not at all. I'm sure they're all fantastic watches. But for me personally, each one of these watches on the list today is better for the reasons that I talked about. And guys, if you like this video, maybe check out these 2 next.